In this recipe, the Petit Gateau that I'm creating is perfect for a multitude of occasions. We have autumn, Halloween, and Thanksgiving. It has a hazelnut sponge on the base, a spice mousse, and in the center, a rose spice pumpkin chocolate cream. It's coated in an orange chocolate and finished with a green chocolate stem. First step is a hazelnut sponge. Now I'm using ground hazelnuts to create the hazelnut sponge. I'm going to combine all these ingredients in a mixing bowl with a paddle attachment. Icing sugar, we've got some egg yolks and some whole eggs. Now we're going to beat this for about 3 or 4 minutes to aerate the mixture slightly. We're going to transfer this to another bowl and we're going to start to whip up our egg whites. And we place a little bit of cream of tartar in there. If you can't get cream of tartar, you can use salt, lemon juice or vinegar. Once this comes to a medium to firm peak, I'm going to gradually add in the sugar. So you want the texture of the meringue to be shiny, but it also should have some movement. I'm going to add 1/3 of the meringue into the hazelnut base here. Now I'm going to sieve in some brown sugar and some flour. Now I'm going to fold those dry ingredients in and then I'm going to add in the remaining meringue. Now I have here what we call a flexi pat. So this is a silicone and fiberglass mat which has sides on it. At this stage you need to preheat your oven to 170 degrees Celsius. The idea of spreading the sponge is you want to use as little movement as possible. So I like to go into the corners first. Make sure the mat's completely covered before I try and make it even. Now that we've got this spread out evenly, we're going to bake it in the oven for approximately 8 to 10 minutes. Our hazelnut sponge is out of the oven and I have placed this in the freezer for about half an hour, which makes it easier to handle and cut. I'm going to place a sheet of baking paper on top, flip it over, and then we peel off the flexi pat. We're going to flip it back over. Now to create our pumpkin shape, I'm using what we call a bloom mold. What's important, no matter what mold you use, and you can really use any shape mold for this recipe, is that the cutter that we use actually fits inside the mold so that the sponge will sit nice and flat on the base. So I'm just cutting out individual discs. You can either store these in the freezer till you're ready to use them, or you can leave them in the fridge. If you leave them in the fridge, make sure you cover them with plastic wrap. Now I'm going to coat some cut pumpkin. I've just taken the skin off, taken out the seeds and cut it into even portions. I'm going to add in some oil, have some nutmeg, some ginger, and some cinnamon. Now I'm just going to ensure that the pumpkin's coated in all the spices. I'm going to spread it out onto a lined tray. I'm going to bake it at 170 degrees Celsius for approximately 15 minutes. We're going to utilize the pumpkin that we've roasted to create a pumpkin chocolate cream. We're going to soak the gelatin in a bowl of cold water. We're going to place the pumpkin into a food processor and I'm going to mix that until it's smooth. I'm going to add in some cream. I'm going to add in our pre-soaked gelatin. We're going to add in some milk chocolate. Now I'm going to ensure that this is at least 34 degrees Celsius or below before adding in some semi-whipped cream. So we've whipped the cream up so it has some body, but it still has some movement in there. And I'm going to fold that through now. Now I'm going to pipe this into a silicone mold insert, which is going to go inside in the middle of our Petit Gateau. Now, if you don't have these molds, it's not a problem. You can actually just spread this mixture out into a small square or plastic container, line it with plastic wrap first, freeze it, and then cut this into individual cubes once frozen. Roll the top of the bag down, and then we place the mixture inside. So I'm going to pipe the mixture in until it comes to the top of the mold. This will now go into the freezer for approximately 4 to 5 hours before we can unmold it. So this needs to be fully frozen before you start the spice mousse. In a blast freezer, this will take approximately 15 minutes. Now with this mousse, we're going to start by making an Italian meringue. So an Italian meringue is where we pour boiled sugar over the egg whites when the egg whites come to a medium to firm peak. The next stage of the mousse is to actually create what we call an anglaise, which is a really light custard. And we're going to set the mousse with some gelatin. So we place the gelatin in a bowl of chilled water, 1 sheet at a time. Now I'm going to place some milk into a saucepan. In with the milk, I'm going to add some spices. I'm going to add some cinnamon, nutmeg, a little bit of salt, and some vanilla bean paste. Now before I start that boiling, I'm going to combine some sugar and egg yolks in a bowl, which we're going to pour the milk mixture over. Once you put the 2 ingredients together, just give them a quick mix. Now I'm going to boil the milk. Once it's boiled, we're going to pour it over our egg yolks and sugar mixture, mix it together before placing it back onto the heat. We're going to bring it up to 80 degrees Celsius on a really low heat while stirring. Before you start heating your anglaise back up to 80 degrees, make sure you have a bowl with a sieve on top because it'll keep cooking even after you turn the stove off. Now you'll have a lot of the spices that are sitting on top. We just simply push them through. We add in the pre-soaked gelatin now. Just gently squeeze off any excess water. The gelatin will melt at 28 degrees, so just ensure that the mixture is still above 28 degrees when you add it. We're going to cool this anglaise down to 34 degrees Celsius before folding through the meringue, followed by the semi-whipped cream. I've weighed out the meringue to 204 grams, and we've got that ready to fold our anglaise through. So it's always a good idea just to add a small amount at the start rather than the whole amount. Then we add some more. What we're looking for here before we add the remaining anglaise is that the meringue itself is closer to the consistency of the anglaise. The meringue initially is really quite firm. If you add all the anglaise in at the start, you'll end up with lumps of meringue. We're now going to fold in some semi-whipped cream. Make sure that all the meringue is incorporated before you add the cream because the cream should come straight from the fridge. It will be chilled and it's going to set the gelatin fairly quickly. So once you add the cream, you must be ready with your insert, your sponge cut, and the mold ready to go. Fold the cream through. Don't overmix this at this stage because it will actually separate. Now I'm going to pipe the mousse in halfway up the mold. As you can see, we've got our beautiful blue mold, which gives us a perfect pumpkin shape. So fill the mold up halfway. We're now going to spoon that up the sides. So when we put in the frozen insert, we don't leave any air gaps on the side. This mousse is beautiful. It's really, really light. And it's actually a really great base, this mousse recipe, if you wanted to make a coffee mousse, for example. So replace the spices and vanilla with coffee, or you could even do an Earl Grey tea. There's lots of different flavors that you could utilize with exactly the same recipe. Now, if you want to put a little bit more mousse in the center before you put your insert in, so that they're placed directly in the middle, because once you spoon the mixture up the sides, it's sometimes hard to judge how much you've got left. Now, when you place these in, don't push them down at all because you don't want them exposed at the top of the Petit Gateau once we unmold them. Now we place additional mousse on top and then we're going to finish with the sponge. So just leaving enough space there for the sponge, but I'm going to put a little bit of mousse just around the edge. We place the sponge in, place it skin side up, because if we leave that skin on, it can sometimes separate away from the mousse. And we just gently press it down. Any excess mousse that we have, we simply scrape off. These now have to go into the freezer. Now, if you've got a normal domestic freezer, I would give them a good 12 hours before you unmold them. If you've got a blast freezer, I'd give them about 40 minutes before unmolding. I'm going to do the pumpkin stem. So I've got some Calabar gold chocolate. If you can't get the gold chocolate, you can use a white chocolate. some milk chocolate, and some oil-soluble green colour, which I'm going to sieve in. So what I'm going to do is mix the chocolate in the food processor until the chocolate becomes smooth and pliable. So you can see the mixture here, it's still got a little bit of the chocolate in there, but if I continue mixing it, it's going to become too soft to actually manipulate and handle. So when I start working with this and rolling it out, those bits of chocolate will actually smooth out. Okay, so we start rolling it. If you've got really hot hands, you'll have to take something from the freezer, chill your hands down before you start rolling it. Now with pumpkin stems, I always find it best to actually look at a real pumpkin, or if you haven't got one, then Google a picture so that you can replicate something as close as possible. Just take out small parts. And the beauty of this is you can't really do it wrong because they're really quite rustic. So I'm just using a spoon to make the base so that it comes out in points. So this does take a little bit of creativity, but you can just simply have a look at a pumpkin and you can't really make a mistake because any shape is fine. I'm just going to cut that off. You can cut these later. And then I'm just going to mark some faint lines. You have to work quite quickly once you start to shape it, particularly if your room is cold, because if you go to bend it and it's sat for too long, it will crack. So once you cut in where you've cut, then go back and just smooth it again. I have some gold chocolate here which I have tempered. If you're unsure about tempering, you can have a look at our video library, watch one of our videos on tempering, then come back for the next steps. Now, as I said, I have used a gold chocolate, which is a perfect base color to color orange. If you can't get the gold chocolate, you can use a white chocolate. I've got some oil-soluble color here in orange, which I'm going to sieve in. It's then a good idea to emulsify it with a stick blender to ensure that all the color is completely blended. It's up to you what pumpkin color you will like. I'm just adding a tiny bit of yellow to brighten the orange up. Next step, once you have your chocolate tempered, is to add the oil. Always make sure it's exactly the right consistency before adding the oil in, because it's easier to adjust the chocolate here than it is once the oil is added. Once the oil is added, we need to temper the chocolate to a white chocolate temperature. So we're going to be working between 29 and 30 degrees Celsius. So we're using a grapeseed oil, which is really mild in flavor, so you're really not going to taste it. Now we've got the chocolate ready. I've got a jug here to put the chocolate into. A good idea before you pour the chocolate into the jug is to warm the jug up with a heat gun so that the chocolate doesn't set too quickly. We've placed the chocolate into a jug. I may or may not have filled it up a little bit too much. We're going to place a Petit Gateau in upside down, then flip it over really quickly to avoid getting drips. Just wipe the surface of the Petit Gateau to ensure that it doesn't have any moisture on it. We place it in. Then we turn it over straight away. A little bit messy, but I think it looks really cute. We just wipe off any excess chocolate on the base. Then, although as I said it's messy, place a skewer between two fingers, twist the skewer to remove it, transfer it onto a palette knife and down onto a serving tray or onto baking paper. Now before the chocolate completely sets, we're going to place a stem in. Now I'm going to continue to dip some more, but these will stay in the fridge for approximately 3 days. You may get a little bit of condensation on the surface, but you can always pat a little bit of it off with paper towel if you're wanting to, or you can actually brush the surface of the chocolate to remove a little bit of that condensation, but I think they look very, very cute. Now to bring back the shine of these pumpkins on the surface, firstly we need to remove any moisture, any condensation on the surface, and then we're going to brush some grapeseed oil. This is perfect for autumn or Thanksgiving and even Halloween as it is, but if you want to take it that little bit further, I'm going to show you how to make it into a jack-o'-lantern. Now I've printed a jack-o'-lantern print. and I'm going to put some cling wrap on top. And then I'm going to tape it and stretch the plastic. So just secure one side down. Then take the piece of plastic and pull it to stretch it while you secure down the other side. Then we just do the edges. Now I'm going to temper some dark chocolate to just pipe out the silhouette of the jack-o'-lantern. Now I'm going to create a paper piping cone. We do have a video on how to make these, but you can also use a plastic disposable piping bag. So we fill the bag, then we fold the bag away from the seam and then fold the top down. So what we're going to do here is do an outline, and then I'm going to fill it in with the chocolate. For these, we just simply pipe it. Now I have a pumpkin here that's been brushed twice with oil. It will dull just a tiny bit more as that oil absorbs in, but not much. It'll still retain a little bit of a shine. We're going to pick up the piece and turn it over. I'm going to pipe a little bit of chocolate on the back, and we're going to secure it on. Place the eyes on. Now I've given you two alternatives, very, very different. I've got the jack-o'-lantern here, which is perfect for Halloween. And then we've got the pumpkins, which I think are very versatile, perfect for autumn, Halloween, and also Thanksgiving.